Hi YouTube, Robin Hood Bricks here, and today we're going to be looking at train ballast. What, why and how. And then we're going to lay some track in the Lego room. So what is train ballast? Essentially it's the gravel in between railway sleepers in real life, but what it represents in Lego is really the upgrade from standard track with its gaps, these holes from production and looking rather plain, to something that looks wholly next level and much more impressive and very 3D. Now, a word of warning before we continue: whatever method you follow with ballast, and we'll be looking at a few different ones today, it does use a heck of a lot of pieces, and therefore it does build up expense wise. If you think about it, if you've got a loop of train track 40 pieces long, which isn't that long really, then you're going to have to multiply the cost of a single piece being upgraded by 40 obviously, and then add in corners. Just for a normal circular loop you've got 16 pieces already, and if like me you're trying to do two loops one inside the other, then the costs can really build up. So economy is a really serious factor to consider. So what's wrong with regular track? Well, part of the problem is you can see through it. So you can either see bits of base plate showing through or bits of table. And because the corner pieces don't attach to base plates because they're on an angle, there's the difference between perhaps the bit that's straight being on a base plate and then the corner sagging slightly as it's off the edge. So one of the benefits of using ballast is we're raising the track up a little bit, putting pieces underneath it that are binding it to the base plates. So not only can base plates be used underneath not just the straights but the corners, but we can also secure those corners, so when a train's going around they aren't moving, the train's not going up or down over bumps, and it's not perhaps going to tilt the track and cause a derailment. That said, there's nothing wrong with normal Lego track, and it is still quite expensive to get a lot of, so taking ballast all over it as a consideration is not in the reaches of everyone. Now, the main difference between the existing standards of how to use train ballast on Lego track vary mainly in the number of plates that are in between the track and the base plate, which I'm representing just for convenience with these 16 by 16 bright green plates. Now, none of the conventions use no elevation because, as we said before, corners just don't fit on base plates when at an angle. So the only way of doing a system that doesn't have any increased elevation would either require the track to sag at corners and be only supported by a table, or arguably worse still, have an upward kink that causes a lot of movement and can look unsightly if your trains are going around, and it can even cause them to derail if they're going at high speed, which is really good fun after all. So obviously the next elevation to consider is one plate up. So between the actual track piece, which is at this level, there's a one plate thickness increase, elevating it above the base plate. Now, the problem with this is, again, when you add a corner, you can't use plates that are attached both to the track and to the base plate because of the exact same problem we had with no elevation. So the way around that is to mount the corners purely on tiles, which would be smooth like these sleepers. Now that's fine, and it will cause it to all be at the same height and it will go round, but then in these gaps in the corners especially, you aren't going to have the same studded textured element that you have here. You'll just have tiles and it will look a bit odd, but it's still valid. Of course you could have studs, but then you end up with the increase in height problem again. But generally speaking, you can fill in the gaps with more plates, add a bit of texture, which I've just done on half of it to show, but it's still quite piece intensive in that you've got to add pieces in between the sleepers all around here, and I think it looks a bit bland. It looks a bit flat and uniform, and I don't particularly like that. So we'll move on to the next level up. Right, so the next level up is obviously 2 plates high, and you can see that that has raised it yet further. Now this gives the benefit of being able to, when you're using a corner, to not only have the layer of tiles which is it's sitting on, which it has to sit on in order to maintain the same level, but also to have yet another layer of plates underneath which can support some 3D ballast and make it consistent with the flat track. But we're now using even more pieces because we've got plates at this level and filling in the gaps here and in here, as well as the actual round plates as well. And what's more, then we enter even more problems when we have something like this crossing a road, because the normal ramp piece will only go part of the way up the hill, and you'll need a second ramp of some sort which looks very unsightly to even get a car crossing this. And you'll see most of the people that use this technique in shows and things have their integrated city in the middle, and then they'll have this track going around the outside, but they'll have no crossings whatsoever, which is a bit unrealistic. And it's not really the look I'm going for, because I want a very dense integrated city. So this is too high for me. Not only that, but with this spread, which looks very good in an isolated piece like this, it's very broad. And some of the tracks I'm going to use are going to be only 4 studs apart, so they'll be this close. So if they've both got this double recessed edging, they'll actually be meeting in the middle with the grey, and it'll just be a great big chunk of grey with no green showing, which is also a bit unsightly. And I also think, again, it's a bit of a long grey snake. It's a bit featureless. Yes, we've got the raised sleepers, but it's relatively uniform. So again, I think we can do better. So this is my attempt at a compromise between all the good points of the other systems and some improvements that I've made. And what I've done is I've got the 1 height increase, which is the minimum we really need in order for it to bond to the base plates on corners. But what I've tried to do is to recess the middle. So I haven't raised the entire section up. I've raised just the outside using some 1x8 plates, and then I'm attaching the 2x4 plates you can see in the middle directly to the base plate itself. And that has the pleasing effect that the ground level is actually beneath, well beneath the sleepers. So the ballast itself is trapped, so to speak, between the sleepers and is recessed itself as well, rather than being level like it was before. This makes the track look even more three-dimensional and impressive. Now on a corner, which is after all the major issue with ballasting track, we have the same issue that now I've only got enough room to put tiles underneath the corner sections, so I won't be able to replicate this ballast. But what I did do instead was work out a way to get over that. And by working out every single correlation between a curved piece and the base plate underneath through a combination of 1x1 plates and 1x2 and 2x2 jumper plates, there are certain instances where you can connect the corner and the next corner and so on round to make a full 90-degree turn to the base plates underneath. And not only that, but you can then fill in as many of the gaps in between with plates, so you've got studs showing, and then where there is room for those to fit a 1x1 round plate, you can also add that. So let's look at what that looks like. So what we have here, starting with a straight piece that you've already seen, is a 90-degree turn made of 4 pieces of curved track. But you can see that it still has consistent ballast all the way through the corner, and it still has the 3D effect being lower than the sleepers with the 1x1 round plates, all the while being only one plate above the base plates themselves. It's also firmly attached sideways. I can't move this, and you can even hear when I pull it up that it is actually connected. So here's the naked skeleton of the same piece of track. We've got just the basic 1x8 plates and 2x4 plates which are supporting the straight elements of the track, and that's obviously a much smaller amount of pieces than were used on the other systems we looked earlier. And then you can see we've got a combination of tiles, jumper plates, 1x1 plates and so on that are holding and supporting the track at intervals where it just happens that the geometry of the underside of a curved piece of track, which still has positions that studs can fit into, it's just where those correlate with locations for studs on the base plate. And then our track just attaches in the absolutely normal way, but it's just got some extra connection points and support around the corner, and there we have it. Nice and smooth. Now some other things to mention are that I've gone for brown 2 width sleepers. Some people like black sleepers, some light bluish grey, some dark bluish grey. I quite like the brown just because it gives another bit of colour contrast between the green, the dark grey and the light grey. So we've got 4 colours there, and that's a really good contrast for me. Also, some people like to go for the 1 wide sleepers, but basically that'll only work where you've got the very piece heavy and costly system that we looked at earlier, where you've got a complete solid snake. And I much prefer having these 3D indentations and this texture that looks really fantastic in my opinion. And because this system is only 1 plate depth above the base plate, it still works very well with the ramp pieces. You can see that although it's 1 below the rail that it would normally be level with, it still looks very seamless. We haven't got to have a very complicated long ramp, and there's even a pleasing bump if you drive a car over the train tracks. Another benefit of this system is that it gives you the ability to have the tracks only 4 apart without filling it with grey bricks, which I think makes it look even better. And here's a 2 wide section that I've mocked up, and I think you'll agree the more of it you see together, the better it looks. We're in the Lego room now, where we've laid a lot of track. Very happy with it. Very 3-dimensional, colourful and consistent, and very space efficient when it gets to having only a 4 stud gap along this wall. Let's look at the crossing in more detail. And here's the crossing in more detail. It's functioning barriers, of course. And these are just some temporary decoration, some advertising boards for people when they're crossing in their cars. And this is just a larger version of the example we saw earlier, missing a couple of the reddish brown 1x1 tiles, as we were a few others on the flex track pieces, just to make those look a bit less obvious. They are required though for the spacing I need to make the most of my room. So now we've got our first base plates down in the Lego room. It's really starting to take shape. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for more videos from Robin Hood Bricks. And I'll see you next time. Now the eagle-eyed among you will have seen a few gaps in some of the basing of the new track that I've laid. And I've added a couple of tan plates to show that even more. And they're the foundation and the beginning of what we'll be doing on the next video. Can you guess what it is? See you then.